2 years, really. She did, as I said, her PhD on this research on measurement. And really, we're trying to understand where the industry is going. And the kind of measures we're looking at is what are the practitioner demographics, what are their roles, what are the measurement and evaluation practices within the South African environment, what is the measurement maturity, how we're reporting on that. And we added an extra one this year, which was AI. And I think that's really kind of quite cool and interesting to look at. So, Tertia, thank you for that. Hopalong, who's communications manager. I've been at Rand Mutual. I've been working with Kopalong for many years, I think about 10 odd, maybe a little bit longer. And is really, really Kopalong is so passionate about measurement, and it's so nice to see people who are that passionate and trying to move the industry along. So Kopalong, thank you very much for joining us. Nicholas, I met Nicholas actually at the FIBEP conference in Singapore, and really Nicholas is head of media relations, and he at DHL. So from a client perspective, also just like Kopalong, giving a client view of measurement, and really his insights when he was talking about media monitoring, insights, analysis was really inspiring, and I thought I'd invite him to this panel. So really, Nicholas, I really appreciate you joining us here and giving your insights. Thank you very much. And last but not least, I mean, I've known also Richard for a long time. Richard has been pounding the measurement drum for the last 30 years. He's the founder of AMEC. Those of you who don't know AMEC, it's the Association for Measurement Evaluation of Communication. And he was one of the founding members of AMEC many years ago. I'm also proud to announce that Richard actually won 11 golds at the AMEC Awards. I think he won 16 awards in total, if I'm not mistaken. So really, he's taken Karma to another level at the end of the day because of his insights around measurements. So I think we've got a lot to learn. So to the panel, thank you very, very much. That's my brief introduction. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Tertia really to talk about the results. And I think after we've spoken about the results, we can really interrogate it, ask questions. And those of you that are listening to this webinar, please, we want your questions. We want difficult ones so that we can see how do we look at it and see if we can actually answer some of your questions. So without further ado, Tertia, do you want to take us through the presentation and the report and the survey that we did?
Absolutely. Thank you, Resi. I'm quickly going to share my screen now, and then we can just give ourselves a slight thumbs up or thumbs down to see if that's working. Here we go. Okay. So first off, I want to open this discussion with a brief reminder that we got baseline data for the study in 2019. And that was very good. Our first follow-up study was then done in 2022, and that means post-pandemic. And it's important to remember that baseline data from 2019, it was an entirely different world when we measured again for the first time in 2022, of course. So this year, 23, is very much our first year that we can compare to baseline sets of data, which is very exciting. And with that, we're seeing slight ups and downs in this, but we see that South African PR practice is steadily keeping its course towards more mature measurement. We are seeing a bit of a downfall from last year, but as we just discussed before the panel started, and as we'll discuss along the way, the demographics of the practitioners are also making a big difference, and we're happy that younger practitioners are taking part in studies like this. So we're seeing that there's a trend to slightly decrease in some aspects of measurement maturity, but for the most part, it's looking good for South Africa. We have to remember that when it comes to mature measurement, we mean, of course, strategy. You can't have maturity without strategy and vice versa. So we are definitely seeing this in data where our practitioners are starting to fulfill a more and more strategic role. They are very much reporting to strategic positions. We can see this year there's an increase in where they are reporting directly to strategic management. And we can also see that they are very likely to be included in meetings or sessions where strategic decisions are being made. So this year we're seeing a slightly higher strong agreement with the fact that they're being included in important strategic discussions, and that is the best news for our practice that we can hope for. Another strong indicator of strategy that we are seeing is, of course, this. While, yes, 91% of our respondents did report that they are fulfilling a technical role, hitting the buttons, 82% definitely fulfilling the managerial role, but then 78% are also fulfilling the strategic role, and this is perfectly aligned with everything we know about South African PR practice for many, many years. I think from the days of Prof. Stein's research about strategic roles, we've known that South Africans tend to have one person doing all three roles, have one person fulfilling all the roles, doing the entire job, and we're seeing this perfectly here once again. So we're seeing strong strategic intent, at least, where 78% of practitioners are agreeing that they do fulfill a strategic role. This includes environmental scanning, preempting issues that may affect their organizations or their clients, deciding the strategic direction of their campaigns, translating the impact of stakeholders to management. All of those high-level tasks, we're seeing very strong agreement that they are doing this. And those are all very positive indicators that we're moving ahead in terms of strategy. And once we fulfill strategic roles, we can increase our measurement maturity. Then it comes to our awareness of the Barcelona principles. Straight up, do you know what the Barcelona principles are? 56% yes is not bad, but it's a slight decrease from last year where we had, I think it was a 58% awareness. Now, this is what I mentioned earlier. It could be attributed to maybe a slightly younger demographic taking part in this year's survey, median age of the respondents, but it's still very positive, over 50%. Then the implementation is also looking quite good, where 70% of these that are aware of the principles are actually also implementing them or reporting to implement them. So in a nutshell, that tells us we are definitely, again, still moving the needle, and we're holding a steady course towards improvement, even with little backslides. But there are also some very interesting trends about our measurement maturity that we're seeing. So the first very interesting thing for me is that where our practitioners are measuring, obviously output level measurement is going to have a high agreement. Yes, everybody is measuring output level. So this is our 46% is our very strong agreement. 24% is our strong agreement. So there's overall very strong agreement for output level measurement, as can be expected. Outtake level measurement is taking a little bit of a hit. Okay, outtake level, this is our message retention, checking that the people are understanding the messages, tone and sentiment, those types of things. And then, of course, our outcome level measurement is the most important one that we're after, because that means, are we measuring that there are behavioral changes? Are we measuring that there are changes in attitudes, changes in opinions, and what we call true change, depending on the goals of the organization or the client? And we're seeing decent agreement there. But this is an interesting trend to perceive, given that a lot of people strongly agree that they are fulfilling a very strategic role, and then we're not quite seeing that translate into the actual measurement practices. So this can also be seen very much in whether we are measuring tone and sentiment. On face value, this looks good. If you give it a quick glance, 52% yes, cool, measuring tone and sentiment. But if you compare the data from last year to this year, last year we had a 40% strong agreement. We definitely measure tone and sentiment, and 30% said, yes, we do measure it. This year we had no strong agreement. We only had agreement, which is not very convincing, which means there's been a decline in where practitioners are measuring tone and sentiment. Again, taken within the context of these practitioners reporting themselves to be highly strategic. We're wondering how much of them feeling that are fulfilling a strategic role, how much of that is actually translating into the measurement practice is one question that we definitely can ask. Holding steady with that discussion, it's great that a lot of practitioners are setting clear goals for social media platforms, but I think we need to look at the other side of this bar for valuable information. From neutral to strongly disagree, we're seeing a lot of people not setting any goals for social media platforms. Interesting, concerning as well, though. Again, on social media, the question asked, are you measuring conversions, engagement, and conversations, as well as coverage metrics like likes and reach? And again, we're seeing an awful lot of people simply not doing that, which is an important thing to, I think, either ask questions about or that we can definitely discuss to figure out why exactly would this be happening. Why would there still in 2023 be practitioners not measuring their conversations, their conversions, their engagement when it comes to social media? Then our old friend, Richard, close your ears. AVEs, if you can't beat them, explain them. It would appear that last year we asked the question, are you using AVEs? That was point blank the question. Last year we said 63% of respondents, yes, are still using AVEs. This year, thanks to Jonna's input in the survey, we made a slight distinction. We asked first, are you using AVEs as a standalone metric? And then we asked, are you using AVEs as part of an index? And this is very positive, where as a standalone metric, only 55% practitioners are still using that. So that's quite a decrease from just last year of people actually using it. But then 63% said we're still using AVEs, but as part of this index, which is fantastic, because if we're not getting fully rid of AVEs yet, then at least we can put it in this index of metrics and it can create the necessary context to paint a full broad picture and not just be reliant on the AVEs, which is the case, unfortunately, still in 55% of our respondents for this survey. And Oresi, as you said, the most interesting and I think also noteworthy point of this year's survey was that we had to include something about artificial intelligence and the use thereof, specifically as it pertains to our measurement and our evaluation. Now, hope you also need to hang on to your chair. 29% straight up. We have no plan on using AI, not now, not in the future, nothing. Thank you. That is slightly concerning for our industry. But I do want to place this within the context of what other people that are using it said just after that, right? So we can say that, yes, 29% of people said, no, thank you. AI is not going to be for us. But then the interesting thing is the benefits that the people are seeing when they are using AI, saving time, improving efficiency, reducing costs. If you read through the full report, another very important segment that we have in there is what challenges are practitioners, what challenges are they having with regards to their measurement and evaluation. And of course, as always, the top three challenges are financial restraints, resource restraints, and time restraints. And using AI are solving all three of those for the people that are using it. That's the top three benefits, but it's also the top three reported challenges. So I think that implies that we can lightly urge professionals to use AI to their advantages because it's going to help them overcome their challenges. And we're seeing that because the people that are using it, they are experiencing exactly that the AI is helping also to overcome the three top benefits directly correlates to the three top challenges that practitioners are receiving. So I think that 2024 and beyond is going to be a time of great growth for our industry. We're looking forward to obviously seeing where this is going to go, especially with new technology entering the arena every single month and week it feels sometimes. But it will definitely be an interesting time for our industry. Where we are heading now, things are overall looking very positive. Resty, I'm handing over to you gladly.
Tertia, thank you very much for that. And yeah, some really interesting insights. I'm going to start with you, Richard, because during COVID, I remember there was this big theme about Clubhouse, if you remember correctly, and the AMEC guys we used to get together quite often on that Clubhouse to actually discuss measurement roles. And the one session that we had was what I was saying to you, like, why is it taking people so long to actually kind of evolve from just pure AVEs into a proper measurement? What are your thoughts around that, and how do we get people to kind of evolve and think more strategically about communications?
Right. Well, thank you, Ornico, Tertia. Thank you for having me on your webinar. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. I mean, I think Clubhouse is an interesting one, isn't it? In light of what Tertia was just saying about AI. Clubhouse was like a flash in the pan, and it turned out it was a feature, not a product. And that's why it disappeared so quickly. And I think that's what we're seeing with ChatGPT rolling out GPT apps and little programs that many people's business models were features, not products. Moving to your question about AVEs, I think we're at risk of seeing a two-speed market opening up in the world, and it's all down to education and constant messaging. So I laud your report that you've done, the fact that you're putting on this webinar as well. These educational initiatives are hugely important. Your report is full of data that correlates with other data that I've seen, which is great because it shows how robust it is. So ECO, which is the global international communications consultants organization, is about to release a report of which I have written the foreword, and it looks at use of AMEC tools and AVEs and stuff like that around the world. And the ECO reported number across all of Africa, so not just South Africa, but all of Africa, was 60% use. So I think your number there was it 50, 55 as a standalone metric. So you can see it's very similar with the rest of Africa. And I think it comes down to really two things. One, ongoing education, of which this is a part of it. And that is needed because I think there is a sheep dip. I think, Tertia, you said that the respondents this year were a bit younger. I think that we see, if you look at you had on one of the slides of the report, you've got a breakdown of the ages of respondents. You can see that a significant chunk are younger demographic people working in PR. And I think it's partly the nature of the industry, partly that at a junior, at an entry level stage, we have a lot more women than men. As we get older, women become mums. A lot of them don't come back to work. And that gender gap is an area that needs to be fixed. But because of it, we get this influx of new people that can't be sheep dipped into education. It has to be an ongoing educational drive. There's so many reasons that AVEs are an invalid metric. You know that AMEC has a white paper, 22 reasons AVEs are invalid. It's one of the Barcelona principles, number 5 on the Barcelona principles. It's an invalid metric. And it works less and less well, if it ever did work well, in this modern media environment that we're in. So I'd expect to see it to start to die out. But I think the importance of events like today, not thinking that it's a one and done sheep dip approach, but that we all have to work hard. We all have to speak with a consistent voice. And so for your our friends and colleagues on this webinar today, for those of you working in agencies, those of you working in house, those of you students, those of you educators, we all have to work together to have a consistent voice that we need to move on beyond AVEs. And let's understand that AVEs are not the value of public relations.
Yep. So Richard, yeah, thanks for that. Nicholas, I'm going to call you in here specifically from a client perspective and a brand and a global brand. I mean, there's so many. You work in so many different markets. I know you specifically work in that Southeast Asia market, but as a brand, DHL works across the different markets, and there's so many different demographics, different segmentation, different messages you need to kind of give out there. How does DHL do it? What are their big issues that they need to work through to actually get a better measurement?
Yeah, so I think, I'm going to be absolutely honest here. I think we still use AVE in our measurement. It's part of one of our index that we use. And I think at the end of the day, we still measure things like the outputs that we have, the outcomes, as well as the impact. I think it's a lot to do with education, right? Where you educate your stakeholder and you start moving them towards the different metrics that you would like to use. Thankfully, for us as a brand, we do have very strong sort of a brand perception study, yearly one that we do. So we do track share of voice according to our competitors. We do track perceptions. We do track what our customers are saying about us. And all those metrics will come into use whenever we do work for the brand itself. But what's more interesting for us is that the same tools that we've been using a lot for measurements, right? Your media monitoring tools, your media intelligence tools. I think we are slowly turning it from a pure benchmarking tool, that means a pure measurement tool, to delivering what I would say it's insights tool now that we're moving forward, right? So other than just telling our stakeholders, oh, this is what the campaign has achieved, what we are inserting more into our reports moving forward is what we could do better, what we have done, and what our competitors have done, what are the gaps we're missing. I think that value that we bring using the same tools that we already have for measurements, I think that adds more value to our stakeholders at the end of the day, right? So the people that we work with, the top senior management at the end, they would like to know, yes, great that we have all these results, but what's next? Right? How can we do better? How do we attract the audience that we want? And when we identify those gaps, then we can say, oh, this is what we're going to do differently the next time as well. So for me, it's more at the end of the day that we're moving more towards saying, let's measure our value versus let's actually deliver value to the business as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nicholas. Hopelang, from a South African perspective, and I know you're passionate about this whole measurement. What are the challenges you see within, and does it differ to what Nicholas sees within the South African environment, and how are we dealing as South Africans along that measurement front, and how do we evolve the industry?
Thanks, RSD, and thanks for the opportunity. Great report, by the way, and I'm glad to be in the company of such highly esteemed people in this field. We've had this conversation already, and my view around, especially measurement, I always say that communications is a subjective science, and it's only measurement that allows us to make it more objective, right? And we're able to be more targeted. Now, with things such as AVE, I think Richard a second ago said that it's dying down. I'm saying it's not dying fast enough. It's it's a big issue for me. Because let's use in South Africa, the power generator, the one who's monopolizing, you know all too well who I'm talking about. Now, when they look at their AVE, how does that help shift the needle? Now, if you're going to say your AVE on negative sentiment, because that's all they're getting, is X amount of millions, how does that translate into better, more scientific, objective communications that is ultimately measurable to the organization? We touched on earlier the fact that we're seeing that people in comms tend to have some sort of a dotted line to decision makers in the organization, the C-suite. Now, if you are to play a meaningful role in helping them shift the direction and strategic direction of the organization, then we've got to look at how we are measuring this entire space where we are in. And certainly in terms of AVE, it's not helping us shift the needle. So there is a need and an urgent need for us to look into that. Richard also spoke about education. I don't think, and maybe we are guilty of this, and more Richard than yourself, Oresti, because you are far more experienced in the field than I am. But is enough being done to educate, especially when you look at those demographics? That listen, there's a new way that of you being more impactful, understanding the landscape, where communication is ultimately going as well in the entire value chain. So I think those are the type of things that we really need to do. And also, I'm passionate about, when you touched on education, partnerships with higher learning institutions. And I think once we start moving more in that space, we are able to capture these young, dynamic communicators of the future. Not only are they joining corporate, but they'll be able to understand that we need to start measuring the space a lot more different than we currently are. I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but while Tisha was busy presenting, she touched on these demographics around the study, and we did speak briefly on this. It's, for me, having millennials that participated largely in this space, and yet they are still anti-AI, is a conversation on its own. It's something that we really have to deal with. I've got my reasons around that, Oresti, but maybe once we start engaging on that, I'm happy to explore further.
Kopalong, just from a South African perspective, I mean, we actually are much, I mean, maybe it's not unexpected that there were a lot of young people completing the survey. I mean, we're a young society at the end of the day. I think it's exciting that there's young people coming into the industry, because if it was only old people, that would be hugely problematic at the end of the day. So it's really, really exciting that there's younger people and that actually completed the survey. But do you think the shift is also, I mean, Cassandra made an interesting point earlier in that that you need a mind shift change, and absolutely you do, and it's our responsibility to help those brands shift it. And sometimes, I mean, I read an incredible book called James Clear with Atomic Habits, and it's about those atomic shifts across. And I think that's all we really need, because I think most brands that we have a look at, that we engage with from an Ornico perspective, they think it's really, really complex. And actually, if you started small, it's not really that complex. So my question to you, Kopalong, around that is, do you think that and as Tertia was showing, that we're actually handling so many different aspects, the technical plus the strategic plus everything, that there's no real time to stop, breathe, think about what is our objectives and move forward. And all we're doing is SOS, sending out stuff.
We've become a sophisticated mailing box, I tell you. And you're so spot on. There isn't enough time for us to be able to expand more on this, because all we're now doing is, listen, I need you to chase this deadline. I need this comms out. I need that out. And for me, the challenge with that, because we're doing all three of those things at the same time, is you're not able now to be more targeted, more measurable, more impactful. So now once you start missing that, you're communicating for just the sake of communicating without any output that can really measure and help shift the needle. You and I have spoken about this at one stage, and I said, I'm frustrated at the fact that maybe corporate will say to you, we're not seeing enough posts on social media. To what end? How, once I've posted all those 1,000 posts, what difference does it make? And I think that's where the confusion lies as well. We want to think that trending is something that really helps the business. It's just a moment in time on social media, which is gone. Now, when you go and measure that against the scientific objectives of the business and your strategy, then you'll come in short. And I think that's wherein lies the issue. But the fact that we have to do all three of those, be tactical, be strategic as well, at the same time, you end up having this messy stew that we find ourselves in. And I do think that we need to just step back a bit and allow our sector to become more strategic and able to align with goals by placing the right emphasis at the right time, depending where we are, in order for us to achieve our goals. Once we do that, I do think we'll see a shift. But as things stand, I mean, newsrooms at one stage, I had the privilege of working in a newsroom. You had a journalist, you had a photographer, you had a driver. Your role was to sit in the back seat, go to your story, come and write your story. Right now, I'm told that not only do you take your own pictures, you edit your story, you put it online and everything. And I just think that's where we're heading. So same thing as corporate communicators. You used to specialize, now you're an all-rounder. And in between all of that, we tend to miss the opportunity to become more impactful.
Yeah. And I think that's what it is. It's really about strategic. And I can't remember, I think it was Vilma or one of the guys online actually was talking about we need to become a lot more strategic if we want maturity around this. Tertia, I want to go back to that social media and the fact that people don't have metrics around it. Do you think that there's sometimes a bit of a growing, I mean, we do the social media landscape report as well, and we kind of look at that, and you're starting to see a little bit, I can't say distrust, but a slight shift within that social media space. People are not, and especially, I suppose, with Elon Musk and his changes on Twitter, brands are not 100% sure what's happened. So because of that, that whole chaos that's happening within the social media space, but also Facebook, very little people kind of going in there, but brands are actually spending time and money on that. I'm just wondering, do you think that is the reason that there's no clear measurement around that?
It definitely could be. It definitely could be. I'm not prepared to commit to a yes or no on this. But I do think the fact that social media is turning into more and more chaos by the day, I think that makes it so difficult for a younger, less experienced practitioner to actually take that step back that Hopelang said and think, what are we doing? What are we doing here? So I think it's all of those things coming together, the chaos of the platforms and the inexperienced, less educated practitioners. It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, but I mean, communication is communication. Doesn't matter which platforms is happening. So
that is what the seasoned professional will tell you.
Yeah, I suppose. Richard, I'm going to go back to, I think it was one of the statements that was made. And guys, those of you online, ask questions. I think we've got an incredible panel here to answer some of your burning questions. But it was Cassandra that says, moving away from AVEs requires a cultural shift within the organization. That's one comment, but also unclear objectives lead to a misalignment of measurement metrics. And I think those are two absolutely valid points. One of our experiences, and I'm just wondering from you, how do you evolve it? One of the experience we have is that we have to sit with the brands and engage in terms of how do we get to those smart objectives? How do they align with the organizational objectives? And it is time consuming because a lot of the guys don't have it, or they do have it, but it's not in a smart, actionable, measurable fashion. How are you finding that experience internationally?
Okay, so first of all, what a great conversation you guys have just had. Gopalang, I hard agree with everything that you were saying there. So what we've talked a bit about the Barcelona principles. The Barcelona principles, think of them as like 7 broad steps, a helicopter view of what good measurement looks like. But how do you actually apply it? And because of that question, AMEC, with OSD's support and other like-minded organizations, academics, practitioners all around the world, we came together and we created something called the AMEC Integrated Evaluation Framework. And Tertia, in your excellent report, it's referenced in there as well, and it's explained the steps of it. The AMEC framework helps people understand how to go from organizational objective through to comms objective, through to understanding what resources you have, through to creating a plan, tactically delivering it, and then measuring it. And we measure it in terms of outputs, outtakes, outcomes to get to the organizational impact. It was designed to work for any organization of any size with any budget. So it really doesn't matter if you're NATO, who do use a measurement framework based on the AMEC framework, to the smallest local charity in the most regional part of South Africa. It really doesn't matter who you are. you can apply the principles of the framework to measuring your communications. I've been running measurement firms for 30 years, and if I'm honest, and as I've got to the end of my career, I'm all about being more honest than less honest. PR professionals need to wake up. They need to lean in. We talked about being too busy. I think Gopalong, you called us post boxes. You know, that's the tactical stuff. In your report, you call it a technical role, but I call it a tactical role. It's just doing stuff. And because we're busy doing stuff, when we come to measuring, we just count stuff. So here's a load of stuff I did. Here's my measurement of the stuff. I've counted a load of stuff. And you give it to your organization, there's a gap. The organization says, well, there's a load of stuff, but what did it do of value to my business? And in this current environment where the world has continued to get more mad for the last 10 years, it's not just the chaos in social media, but it's the chaos in geopolitical, populism, supply chain, inflation, cost of living, hot wars. Unfortunately, you know, the instability in the world creates the one thing that CFOs hate. And CFOs the world over hate uncertainty. Uncertainty makes them do two things. CFOs have two levers, right? They can put their foot down on the accelerator pedal and spend money and hope that they'll grow their organization by spending money, and will invest, have more salespeople, more marketing, and will get more return. Or they go, hold on, things look really dreadful, pull back on the lever, let's stop spending money on anything that isn't creating value. And if we can't demonstrate the value of our work, not the activity, but the value, we're in a really dangerous place. So we have to lean in to being able to understand the value that we provide the organization and understand how to measure it. And I've spoken enough. I'll come back to how to do that if you like a bit later. But it's not as difficult as we might think, even though the world is changing at a rapid rate.
Thanks for that, Richard. Nicholas is a great question from Gordon Miller that I think, from a brand perspective, if you can, just give us some insights. He says, should we compartmentalize the various sectors, especially at the strategic level? Reaching the right people at the right time in the right context is straight out of the media strategy playbook. I mean, absolutely. How are you seeing it from a brand perspective?
I mean, definitely, for sure. So I think, it comes as a surprise that in the report itself by Tertia, that measurement is not at the top of mind when we start anything, not just social media at the end of the day, right? For us here at DHL, the thing, when we start a campaign, it always comes with what's the objectives, right? I think I'm very lucky to be in an organization that has treated the comms department as a consultant more than just a post box at the end of the day, right? Because they come to us for counsel as to what works best when it comes to putting their stories out there. And we are able to then go in and ask the question, what's their objective? What's their business goals? I think when we can align what we do with how they're going to achieve their business goals, I think that's where the value will naturally be driven, be extracted as well, right? So for us, I think we've I'm not really saying that we've compartmentalized it, but we do see a point where we see what's their objective, what's the audience that they're trying to reach, and then talk to the different teams that we have, and then decide which touch points will work for them. And more importantly, what sort of timeline are we looking at, right? So a lot of times when we do a media blast, whether it's a press release, a media interview, or a media briefing, that opens the door for us to be in that conversation. And how do we sustain that conversation? And that's where we bring in our digital team. That's where we bring in our internal comms team. Sometimes people forget that employees themselves are sort of an audience for them as well, where you can sort of become an ambassador, where they can understand where the service is coming from or where the company is coming from. So all those things come into plans, and all those things come into the plan at the start, so that when we go back, we can then say, this is the plan that we're going to do, and this is why we're doing it this way, and this is how we align it to your business goals and how you align it to your objectives. So I think that's the kind of conversations that I think we should be having as an industry as well. And hopefully, I think, like you say, that's a generational shift as well, right? So people like me, I think I've been talking about measurements and all this bringing value to the business since I started 20 years back, and we're still having that conversation. So hopefully, as people like us who's moved into roles where we can sort of make a difference, that we'll remember that, right? And stop asking for ABEs from our agencies and stop looking at these kind of pure number outputs, measurement metrics, and then start shifting that conversation as well. And it will take some time, but hopefully by the next generation that steps up, we will be there already, and we'll no longer have this conversation as well.
Yeah. I also think, though, I mean, going on to your other point there, Richard, in terms of that the world is in a crisis, but financially, the world is also in a crisis, and brands are in a crisis. So utilizing measurement and evaluating your comms actually makes it more strategic, and with less money coming into the space, you know exactly where you should be spending your money and where you shouldn't be. Kopalong, I think, talking about that, and I'm going to go back to that Gordon's question around that measurement and the money being more scarce than it used to be in the past. Gordon's asking, and I'm interpreting this to be paid, owned, and earned models. So do you think that the paid, owned, earned models are obsolete? I'm not 100% sure what he means by it. I mean, I know paid, owned. We know what paid, owned, earns is, but what does he mean by that model? But I mean, you got to look at it across all the different channels. But the paid channels, the owned channels, the earned channels, the shared channels. Is that model obsolete, do you think?
I think it's fast reaching its extension. It's a system personally that I don't even believe in. With my previous employers, I was able to engage with a vast number of people, measure, because we're working together on it. And not once did I have to take out a buck to engage with my stakeholders. And I think it also speaks to the messaging and how you craft and compel and engage with your people. And I think that's one of the things that the right measurements can give us, the type of way you should be engaging. So personally, I do think we're reaching a point where you shouldn't be spending anything to really engage. Maybe to engage a bigger pool, perhaps, but in terms of advertorials, I do think that business is fast dying down. And consumers of news have become a lot more smarter. They can tell that this is an advertorial. It's as good as a brochure in a magazine or a newspaper, and it just doesn't reach the audience. That's my view of it, my subjective view, of course. But wherever I've been, I tend not to believe in spending in that area.
Yeah, but yeah, but I do think that we can't leave it in silos. So we need to evaluate the paid and measure the paid side. We need to measure and see how effective the owned is. We need to look at all the earned stuff from the social media. So I think all of that we do need to kind of consolidate and not look at them in silos. As you're saying, we need to kind of consolidate them all together and see how they're talking to each other. I've got a lot of there was a lot of talk about AI, so I want to move to that. I've been holding it back, but I don't want to run out of time because that's been a lot of the conversations at the beginning of this was about AI, and I'm just concerned it's already 43 minutes have passed. So, Tertia, do you want to? I'm going to just go and give that. I'm going to talk about that intention. So you spoke about intention, and we said in South Africa, 29% of people intended not to use AI. Internationally, I was looking, and we've got a report by Alicia Bors in our report, and she says when she was at a conference 3 weeks ago, there was 15% of people globally are looking at no intention of using AI. But I think there's an interesting stat in when we looked at our reports, there was 22% people who actually utilized it this year. Internationally, it was 28%. So we're not really that far behind at the end of the day. How do you think it's going to evolve? And where do you think the most important challenges are within the AI space and measurement, but also content?
Yo.
Sure. Yeah.
I think I think I'm going to throw this back to what Richard said. One of the most challenging aspects of AI is the AI itself, figuring out how far you can trust it to be accurate, correct, and helpful, and also in the technical aspect, learning how to use it properly. And then again, if we're looking at a practitioner that is overwhelmed and doing too much every single day, asking them to put everything on hold and to learn these tools that aren't yet fully developed, and it's not yet established what the best practice for them are. It's really asking a lot of practitioners globally to do that, hey?
But you not think that if we don't start working on it, we have no choice? It's like saying in 2007 or whatever it was, so I'm not going to be working on social media at all because I don't believe in the medium. Don't you think you're going to lose out on a lot of value?
But
Clearly,
loads of people were saying that in 2007. That's the point. I mean, this is that happening again in many ways. They just can't afford to do it now. They'll be making, the people there with the no plan column need to get a plan and start finding the time. The worst message, the worst news I think that we can give to the marketplace today is we know that everyone's very busy, but they need to find the time to measure in a meaningful way and think about their objectives and their strategy and a plan and measuring against that. And they need to also find the time to look into how they can use AI. There's some great ideas listed here on this page that we're looking at. Sorry to jump in there, Tertia, but
No.
couldn't resist it when Oresti said 2007 all over again because he's right.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. But do you think, Richard, do you not think it's about fear as well? It's not about only time. Do you not think it's fear?
I think it's fear. I definitely think it's time. I definitely think it's fear. And I think a lot of stuff is about really just excuses. If you don't see the value, you make an excuse. And I think people can hide behind, oh, it's changing every week. Which tool should I use? There are some genuine concerns, of course. There are privacy issues. There's hallucination issues. There's copyright issues, et cetera, et cetera. Where I'm actually seeing the best use of it is, we talk about generative AI, in other words, sort of additive, creative type stuff, actually is in what you might call reductive. So taking some content and summarizing it, taking some content, changing its tone. But you need to look around at different tools. There's a number of different tools that that you can have that only look at your own content, that avoid these issues. They're tools. One great one I'd throw out there for people to go and take a look at is a new type of search engine. If you haven't come across this, called Perplexity AI. Rather than serving you a whole load of different links, like Google and Bing have always done, it gives you answers. And Perplexity does it in real time with references, so you can check that the answer it's giving you is correct and up to date. So go and take a look at that one. Another favorite of mine, and we should have run it today. We can run it afterwards if you're going to share the recording with people, is something called Fireflies.ai, which can come to a meeting. It can be your virtual assistant. It can take a transcript of the meeting, and it can give you a summary of the key topics and points that were discussed there as well. So there's some great and safer tools that can be used already, but they're developing every single week.
Absolutely. Nicholas, I'm going to bring you here, and I'm going to tell everybody that actually you studied to become a software engineer. So your job wasn't really from a head of media relations. So you've got that software engineering background. Your thoughts around the AI and the use of AI within our communication space, and I'm not only just saying PR, but across all the different channels.
Yeah, so I think what we are seeing about the use of AI in our communication space is the same thing that I see when we talk about bringing robotics into our warehouses, right? There's that fear that if we bring those in or we start engaging with it, we'll lose our job, we'll lose what we actually do. But that's the opposite, right? It doesn't mean that if you don't use it, that one day it's not going to take over your job, right? I think you need to figure out where AI plays that space, what values it brings currently, what value it will bring in the future, so that then you can evolve yourself accordingly as well, right? To make sure that you stay above what AI can offer. For us, we definitely do use AI and plan to use AI a lot more moving forward. DHL has their own generative AI back of ChatGPT as well that we've been using, so that we don't sort of plug it into the public space. But a lot of the work that we do is not the final product that we give to our stakeholders. It's not that final press release. It's not that final graphics. It's not that final copyright, right? For us, it's that we'll plug it into AI to see what sort of different things that it will give back to us. Because sometimes when you look at a press release, you look at something that you've written, and you can only see it so many times before you run out of ideas, and then you have no idea where you're going wrong with it, or the options that you've not considered before. So that's what we're using AI for. The other thing that we're trying to use AI for is visualization, right? A lot of times, last time when we talk about video ideas, and then we want to do storyboarding, we either have to get an agency to do it, or we do some rough textual-based sort of storyboarding, and that confuses everybody that looks at it, because they can't really visualize what you're seeing, right? But with AI tools for now, we can actually plug in the instructions, get that scene out, show it to people. And I think it's always good that you have ideas that you can visualize, because it's easier to make it, to bring it to life as well. So definitely we're using AI a lot more. And I think there's no way we can do media insights without some sort of AI at the end of the day, right? There's just too much out there to sift through, especially for a company like ours where DHL is mentioned everywhere. Like, where do we filter and how do we filter? I think AI is just going to help us do it better moving forward.
Yep, absolutely. And guys, when you download our report, Alicia Bors has done an incredible job about what AI can do. I mean, here's a really interesting from a report, and when she talks about that, there's many different aspects, but here's a really cool aspect where generative AI can actually play a significant role in predicting and managing a potential crisis. So you can look at it, look at your data, put in the data, and it can include social media, new platforms, whatever it is, and help you to be able to understand what is happening and is there a potential risk coming forward. And I think that's where we can also use that. Human beings sometimes cannot do it, cannot be as quick, but also sometimes when we're looking at data as human beings, we look at it sometimes in a linear fashion, and AI looks at it and picks up certain trends that we as human beings might not be able to pick up. And that's, I think, a really important reason why we should actually utilize AI. Kopalong, your thoughts around that?
You know, Rusty, my view is if you can't adapt, then you're going to die. Now, practitioners that are not embracing AI right now because of the fear of job security actually in more trouble than they think, because they're not getting ready for where we're definitely heading. And those that have embraced it are actually in a safer position. So my view is it's something, and as department leads, I think it's something we should really start introducing, this AI. One of the things, if Tesha, if you can just scroll back up for me, please. And to Richard's point earlier, thank you, there we go. Richard spoke about CFO, that if you don't see value, Nicholas also spoke about value. If the business can't see value, then they shut down operations. Now, if you look at media research and think of the amount of money that you would ordinarily spend to get that type of data from a third party, it's a lot of money. So with AI, you're able to get a fast turnaround time. You're able to save a good buck for the business. And if you ideation as a whole, I mean, I'm all for ideation, but it helps bring ideas together, conceptualize issues, and we're able to move forward with a clear plan and understanding. It also gives you a global view, because for all too well, we stuck in our ways, and with AI, you're able to get the global view. I do think a conversation that needs to be had in the future is around intellectual property of that information. Once you start generating info from it, that should get in. But that's once AI starts to mature. It's something still failing you in our space.
Yeah. big debate around that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tertia, I can see you edging to go. You wanted to say something? No, okay. There's a great question here for Nicholas from Cassandra again. Touching on the ethical element, Nicholas, what are your thoughts on organizations' ability being clear about how they use AI and data, impacting how trust and credibility are measured in PL campaigns?
I mean, like I said, because we don't use it as the final product to the public, right? So I don't think that's always been a case on the ethical use of AI. And we will never put something out there that's not a representation of what we do as an organization. So I think, yes, it is very important that brands are clear about where they use AI, how they use AI. But if it's normally within an AI, like Richard has said, it's a segment of AI that you've taken and you put into your organization. So everything is there. You're not taking public data out there, right? We are not creating ads out of AI and then taking away the artist copyrights and things like that, right? So I think that's where that important distinction is made, right? And being a global brand, that's where we would definitely play it very, very safe. It is not something that at the moment we're planning to use and then say we'll put it out there and say that that's something that we've done or work that we've claimed as our own.
Yeah. Your thoughts around that, Richard, the ethical element of AI?
Well, I agree with what Nicholas said. It's hugely important that we're ethical. I think where we do use it to generate content, I think the sensible brands, if they have used it, would be acknowledging that AI contributed to the article. I think, we've seen examples like lawyers in America, I think, have reported case law that didn't exist, and being caught out. So you run the risk of being made to look particularly stupid if you don't. And I think from a media intelligence, PR measurement perspective, we have to be careful. We can't just upload whole scale huge amounts of content that we don't own the copyright to into machines that we don't know what happens to the content once it ingests it. We're seeing copyright cases happening now against image companies because a lot of generative AI imagery is being based on whole scale copyright infringement of Getty images, for example. So we just have to act and behave in the correct manner. And I think ethics is not that difficult a thing. It's looking into your soul and saying what's the right thing to do. And normally our gut feel. Humans are amazing with their gut feel. Their gut feel normally tells them what to do. Tertia, I'm glad you stopped sharing that report because I'm sitting here getting colder and colder, and I could see your temperature, bottom left, getting warmer and warmer. You've gone up to 30 degrees sunny, it said. So, I'm sorry that I'm starting to shake.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Richard. I think, Cassandra, if you send me an email at orstp@ornicogroup.co.za, I will send you an incredible FIBEB podcast. I can't remember. It's called Media Intelligence Explained. I can't remember which episode it was, but there was somebody that actually was talking about the ethics of AI and it was one of the most interesting podcasts I've listened to for a very, very long time. And so if you can just drop me a line, I will send you that link. Guys, we've got 1 more minute left, so let's finish it off. Just last quick words about the research. Richard, hop along, Nicholas, Tertia, 30 seconds each of you, if you can just give us a view of measurement and where we should take it in the next year. Where should we be next year this time? Richard. Oops, you are on mute.
No, I'd lost you. I was looking at that podcast and then I couldn't find you to come off mute. First of all, I think this is a great report that's been produced. So congratulations to you guys. I think it's fabulous you put this event together. I think the report contains some really positive data. I think there's some areas where there's clearly a disconnect in understanding between what people think they're doing and what they are doing. So there's a lot of talk around we're strategic advisors, but there isn't a lot of evidence that we're actually doing strategic stuff. So we need to just remember that we need to act in the way that we want to behave. I see a lot of positivity. I see a bit of a red flag around the AI number. We've just talked about that 29%, that needs to change. I thought, again, hard agree with Gopalang and his, if anything that doesn't evolve goes extinct. So we need to evolve on that. My message to everybody is, in an uncertain world, we can't afford to be busy fools. We can't just serve up 50 press releases, 100 likes and retweets, and 1 billion impressions. They're meaningless numbers. We need to move beyond that. We need to think about, how do we measure in a way that shows that our target audiences, the key people, the stakeholders that we want to communicate with, have we communicated in a way that they've seen it, they've thought about it, and they've done it? That's the way Karma talks about it. See, think, do. Bucket your metrics into them. The more nerdy language is outputs, outtakes, outcomes, which you'll see in the Amex framework. But to simplify it, think of see, think, do. Pull those metrics together, and then you can tell a meaningful measurement story that links to the impact of the work and the value that you've created. I think I commend the South African market. I commend Oresti, you and your company for all the work that you do. I think that, if you compare your region to, for example, Asia Pacific, I think that we see, there's quite a big gap, and I think it's testament to the leadership of you guys in the market. So thank you to you for that. And let's all keep fighting the good fight.
Good, thank you. Kopalong.
Thanks, Oresti. I think it's a really incredible report, great insight, lovely work from your team, Tisha. The work speaks for itself, rich insight. And once the embargo is lifted, I can't wait to share that insight, especially with the newer generation. And I'm almost said newsroom, but I'm not in a newsroom, but the newer generation in corporate communications, the new practitioners. I think there's a lot we can do around there. And Nicholas, really lovely work that you guys are doing as well. And Richard, great being in your company. And I look forward to us moving to a more scientific, measurable system and moving away from your AVEs, because as you know too well, Oresti, how passionate I am about that, because AVEs give us a common goal. What does success look like? Does it look like $1 million US? Is that all? by saying you've reached that AVE, is that success for you? And we should move away from that. So exciting times lie ahead, and I'm looking forward to next year's report and being part of the process. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Nicholas. Just from a brand's perspective, what is the one thing you think, the simple thing a brand can do right now to be able to just measure? Well, it depends, I suppose. But I mean, globally, just from one point, what should brands do tomorrow?
I think it's back to communication, and I don't mean putting out the press releases and the campaigns, but really communication with your stakeholders, right? With your CEOs, with your CFOs. If you understand what they are measuring and then bring back to what you can measure, that linkage is very important at the end of the day, right? We can talk all about reach, target audience, clicks. We can talk all about the impact that we want to have, but the greatest impact that we have is that we bring back our contribution to their business objectives. So it's very important to find that link and connect those. So hopefully next year we won't be talking about how and why we need to measure, but really what more can we measure.
Tertia, you got 15 seconds because we're already running late. Sorry.
Nicholas, loved hearing that. I think that we've spoken a lot about education, awareness, and all of these things to ensure that it gets used. And while organizations like Ornico and Amex are making great strides in producing this awareness and education, I think there's a big academic gap. And I think academics and agencies are the two elements that need to step up, and they're the ones that can truly make the difference for the generations going forward.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you very much. Richard, Kopalong, Nicholas, Tertia, thank you very, very much for joining us and your efforts, Tertia, in terms of this research, and we really appreciate it. And everybody out there, thank you very much. And I want to give a special thanks to the designer of this, Jess Jessica did an incredible job. So those of you get onto the Ornico website, download it. The information is incredible and will move the industry forward in terms of this measurement. And those who want the podcast, just email me. I can't find it right now, so I'm not sure which it is. So I can't put it onto the chat. So just email me and I'll send it to you. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You.
Bye, everyone.